Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles.
from Mellow Amps. And in one of the last episodes, we're going to talk a little bit about troubleshooting. Now, in the previous episode, we got to the point where we were probing all key voltages. And if you pass that, well, skip ahead because, in fact,
You don't need this episode.
you don't need this episode. But we're going to give you the basics of testing and troubleshooting so that you can hopefully isolate the problem yourself. So what's the most common problem with any valve amp? The tubes. The tubes are the amplifiers.
If you have a bad tube, you have a bad amplifier.
So if the kit came with tested and matched tubes from us, then you can make a presumption that the tubes are good. Now, 99% of the time that's going to hold, but every once in a while tubes get damaged in transit. So there's a small possibility that they were damaged, but Charles packs these really carefully.
And test them carefully.
But if you scrounge the tubes from somewhere, that's absolutely fine. But if you've got problems and you don't have a proper tester for the tubes, and you don't know if the tubes are actually good operating tubes, then I would stop. I would find a good set of tested tubes before I even bother doing anything else. Okay, now, when it comes to figuring out what's wrong, the schematics are your friend because these have actual voltages that are pulled from an actual operating kit that's identical to your kit. Mm-hmm. What does change is your mains voltage. So this is your primary side here. So when your mains voltage goes up, all the voltages on the secondary side, all the way through the amp, including the preamp circuit, go up.
Same for if it goes down.
Okay, so everybody gets that. And some voltage regions are not good multiples of each other. So you might find that all your voltages are down a little bit or all your voltages are up a little bit. That's perfectly normal. Don't worry about that. See the big note? All voltages are approximate. Now, if you started it up the way we recommended, you started with no tubes loaded, Note 8 tells you the approximate voltage at 325 volts DC, and you've got the probe test points, TP3 and TP4. If you've got a good meter and you passed the approximate voltage unloaded, no tubes in, then you can pretty much presume that all of this wiring is correct back here. If, without any tubes in, this voltage is not stable, it's up and down like a yo-yo, it's nowhere near this center value with no tubes loaded, then the problem is back here, at least one of them. And you can start by going back here and probing these test points and seeing if the problem is not stable, let's say here, but it's stable here. That lets you know, okay, so I'm stable here. That means that everything back here is fine, and the problem is in here. That helps you isolate and look specifically at the components to see if everything is wired up properly.
So then you want to work through, double check that you have components in the correct places and that leads and solder joints all look good.
Now, we're always available, and the online forum in the store is always available, so you can jump into the online forum if you're not sure about something and you'd like other builders to jump in and help. And Charles, he moderates the forum, so he's always there keeping an eye on things, making sure everybody's on the straight and narrow. So the forum is a great thing. And I would start there, but you can always email us. And, we're on top of things. So we'll give you a hand right away. If you're not sure or you're really worried about something, stop. Unplug the amp, discharge it, walk away, and get an email out and
Ask for some help.
Okay, so let's just presume that the no tubes loaded voltage is stable and it's in the ballpark of 325 volts DC. So now the preamp circuit is your friend and all the voltages are measured and they're all noted in red.
And if there's something wrong with a component or a tube or something in circuit, it'll be obvious whenever you check these voltages and compare them.
That's right. So remember, both these tubes are twin triodes. So there's two tubes in one envelope. So there's two sets of connections. You can see them here. The plate is 1 and 6. The grid is 2 and 7. The cathode is 3 and 8. And when you measure 1 and 6, one after the other, you should see a very close voltage. Same goes for the cathode. So let's say you measured these voltages and these were fine. And then you came over here and this was way, way, way off. And this would be way off as well. You may well have maybe put the wrong resistor in here, put the wrong tube in here. And in fact, there's a recommended list of tubes for V1 for the preamp stage. And 6N6P is really the tube for the purposes of what we're doing. I would run the 6N6P in here. Just a standard 6N6P, not the dash I, not, something
that's similar to a 6N6P.
Yeah.
Technically, a lot of things would work in there, but the 6N6P is fantastic. It's all you need in that spot.
Yeah, and when you're troubleshooting, you don't want to be fooling around with other tubes. So if I was troubleshooting this amp, I would make sure I had a 6N1P-EV in V1 and a 6N6P in V2. So that'll help you isolate where these voltages will help. Now, what gets really complicated is if your B+ is going up and down like a yo-yo. That's a sure sign that you've got a significant problem, and you really need to actually check all of your components on the board to make sure that they're actually what they should be, particularly the resistor values, because it's not easy to mix up the resistor values, but in kit build number 1, I actually swapped 2 resistors by accident.
R6 and R7, yep.
Now, we caught it right away, but if we hadn't, we'd be troubleshooting.
Yeah. And also, if you're having that sort of yo-yoing effect with the voltage, it sometimes helps to take out one tube at a time and see if that yo-yoing goes away, because then that tells you that it's a part of that circuit. Because without the tube in place, this doesn't actually function here, or this doesn't function.
That's a really good bit of advice, Charles. So what I would do is, if your voltages are not stable, if they're going up and down, I would turn off the amp and wait for it to cool off, and then I would pull the cathode follower 6N6P and turn it back on. And if these voltages are on target, they'll be a little higher because this tube draws some current. But if they're in the ballpark, then that lets you know the problem's over here.
And vice versa.
Yeah. So at this point, if you still haven't found the problem, I'm going to recommend you check all your resistor values on the board, and Charles is going to show you how to discharge the amp to make it safe.
So we'll do that again. So we're going to grab the discharge tool.
So the first thing we do is we disconnect the IEC. Always, always, always. We disconnect it. Even if the power switch is off, with this cord disconnected, you can operate much safer in the unit because there's no chance you can turn it on by accident or forget that it's on.
Now I'm just going to remove this ground clip here because that's the best spot for you to bring your little ground connector. I'm just going to bring it in here carefully, make sure it's on there, and then I'm going to go to the discharge point. And now we've got no little snap here. You might get, well, I don't know if you can see that on screen. Sorry, we're out of focus. I'll do this again from a different angle.
Here, hang on. I'm going to help Charles.
So
it's a little, this is a cute little preamp, and it's a little bit hard to get all of our fat fingers in here and let you see at the same time.
So we've got the discharge here point with the warning lightning bolts, and you just want to bring your probe to there. And you might see a little snap, but we've already discharged it. And if you leave the tubes in whenever you turn it off, it will naturally discharge very quickly on its own.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully that'll help you with the troubleshooting. Again, if there's any issues, reach out to us or go onto the forum and we'll be happy to help you solve any problems.
Yeah, and we were showing you earlier in the video series how to check resistors. You can check resistors in circuit. So you're going to disassemble, now that you've discharged the unit it's safe to work on, you're going to take the top plate and separate it from the body. And you're going to have to basically take the board apart, disconnect your wires, get it out, and now you're going to probe your resistor values, and that actually is dead easy. So you're going to come along and you're going to check every resistor logically. So I would start at the very beginning with R1,
which is right here, the 680K,
and R2A and R2B, and I would just move my way through with an ohm meter, and I would check every resistor carefully and make sure it's in the right position. And if at that point you haven't found the problem, you should already be talking with us or on the forum, and somebody will give you a hand. These amps, though, they are really well laid out, and if you were careful in the build, the chances that you've got this kind of a problem are extremely unlikely. But if you do, we'll give you a hand. But in how many years of shipping kits to customers, I don't know if I think I once had a gentleman have a problem with some of our monoblocks, and in 3 seconds I figured out the wires that he had miswired.
And it's much more complex to build those kits, so this should be a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think I got an email back. He didn't thank us, but he said, duh. So you can do something really boneheaded, and
we do some things really boneheaded sometimes too, and spend a while troubleshooting. So there's no shame there. It happens. But
one thing is absolutely for certain: we'll get your kit working.